John, can you confirm if the live stream has started, please?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Development Management Review Committee session here up in Forfar, Friday the 7th of June. Just to let everyone know, this meeting is being recorded, but is also being broadcast live on the Angus Council YouTube channel. Can I remind all those joining us remotely to turn their microphones to mute, please, unless they wish to speak, and they should do so by raising their hands remotely. Also to remind members that under Standing Order 13, remote members attending where quasi-judicial and regulatory matters are being considered will not be permitted to participate by audio only and must have their video and camera functions switched on at all times during the meeting. Okay, Karen, are there any apologies for absence today?
Convener, there's no apologies, but just to confirm, we have Councillor Clark in the chamber and Councillors Darnold, Gall and Stewart joining the meeting remotely.
Thanks for that. Members, any declarations of interest, statements of transparency on this today? I wouldn't think so. Fine, thanks very much. Okay, well, to get started today, the committee is being asked today to the application for review in respect of the refusal of planning permission for erection of a crematorium and associated structures under planning application number 20/00830/full at land northeast of Duntroon House in Duntroon. This new DMRC have all received either physical or electronic copies of the circa 4,000 pages of reports and comments on this application. In light of that, it's recommended that the committee today, 1, consider if further procedure is required as detailed at section 5 of the report you have. 2, if further procedure is required, determine the manner in which the review is to be conducted. And 3, if no further procedure is required, A, review the case submitted by the Planning Authority in Appendix 1, B, review the case submitted by the applicant in Appendix 2, consider lodged representations, Appendix 3, and consider the applicant's response to the representations in Appendix 4, and finally, E, consider the Planning Authority and applicants' responses to the written procedure notice in Appendix 5. By way of background, the previous DMRC, at its meeting on the 14th of March 2023, agreed to uphold an appeal and grant planning permission for the erection of the crematorium and structures at land northeast of Duntroon House, subject to conditions. Those conditions were agreed at a meeting of the said DMRC on the 13th of June 2023. The decision of the DMRC was subsequently appealed to the Court of Session. On 12th of March 2024, the Court of Session granted a consent order agreed by the parties, which allowed the appeal in part and determined that the application for review by Duntroon Limited against refusal of planning permission be considered afresh by a differently constituted DMRC. And this is where we find ourselves today. At this stage in proceedings, I'm going to ask Mrs. Leslie Tierney, who is the Independent Planning Advisor, to present the application for review. Mrs. Tierney.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, good morning. Yes, I'm Leslie Tierney. I'm a planning consultant based in Aberdeenshire, and I'm here today to present as Independent Planning Advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I previously visited the site on the 24th of January 2023. I have had no previous involvement in the processing of the application, and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. So to confirm, the application was refused for the following reasons. Firstly, the development would result in an unsustainable pattern of travel and development and would not be accessible by a choice of transport modes, increasing reliance on the private car in a situation where access to walking, cycling and public transport is poor. The proposal is therefore contrary to TAPLAN policies 1 and 2, Angus LDP policies DS1, DS3 and TC8, and Scottish planning policy insofar as it relates to locating development in accessible locations. And secondly, the application is contrary to policy DS1 of the Angus LDP because the scale and nature of the development is not appropriate for its location, because it does not enjoy good accessibility, particularly for pedestrians, cyclists and public transport, and because the proposal is not in accordance with other relevant policies, namely DS2, DS3 and TC8. So as the convener has highlighted, various appendices are attached to the report, including the submission by the Planning Authority, the submission by the applicant, further lodged representations, the applicant's response to the further representations, and the written procedure notice, along with the planning authorities and applicant's response to the procedure notice. So firstly, I would like to take you through some slides showing the plans and photos of the site and various road junctions, and then I will summarise the policy context and some of the points covered in the appendices.
Bear with me, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, next one. Yeah. Go to the next one. Okay, so the first one, this is the site context plan. So the application site is 1.99 hectares on the southernmost part of an agricultural field located north of the C4 public road and around 300 metres northeast of Duntroon House. The larger field is contained by woodland and the public road with existing trees along the southern boundary of the road. And onto the site plan. The application site is bound by a woodland area, Duntroon Hill to the west, a woodland strip to the east, with an access track and 2 houses beyond, and a 3rd house further to the north is accessed from the same track. To the south is the public road with mature trees along its edge, and the balance of the agricultural field lies to the north against a woodland backdrop. This is the building and external works plan. The building would be positioned to the southwest part of the site, orientated on an east-west axis with parking and circulation to the east of the building. Access would be taken from a new junction formed with the C4 public road to the south, leading to 127 car parking spaces, 7 disabled spaces, space for coaches to wait, and staff parking to the north. There's a planted garden and memorial garden included to the front and south of the building, and the site boundary would be formed to the north by a post and wire fence, a new feature dry stone wall, and entrance gates formed at the southern boundary with new tree and hedge planting across the site. These are a couple of the site sections which show the building in the context of the slope. Proposed elevations and ground floor plan show the crematorium would be a 544 square metre single-storey pitched roof building around 8 metres high, the entrance and reception hall to the front with the main hall directly behind, accommodating seating for 120 people. The cremator and servicing are to the rear, with the stack on the rear roof section terminating at around 9 metres from ground level. The administrative areas are to the north and the public exit to the south. The building is described as reflecting a traditional, simple agricultural form with natural slate roof and grey and timber-clad elevations. And now some photographs. So this is looking at the application site from the public road to the south into the field there. And then this is again from the public road along the south boundary of the site, looking from the access point into the site, both to the east on the top there and to the west at the bottom. This is our junction locations plan. So just to explain each one, junction 1 in the middle there is the junction of the C4 West Hall Road with the U315. Junction 2 is the junction of the C4 West Hall Road with the B978. Junction 3 is the U315 and the B978 junction, and junction 4 is C4 Road Junction. And we'll just go to photos of each one now. So the first one here, this is junction 1, the junction of the C4 West Hall and U315, and that's looking towards the application site to the north. And then from the same junction, looking to the south towards the B978. Then we will now look at junction 2, which is the C4 and B978 junction. So this is looking south from that junction, sorry. This is looking south from that junction towards Dundee. And then the next one is same junction looking north towards Kellis. Then coming back to the location plan, junction location plan number 3, which is the U315 and B978 junction. And then from this junction, this is looking south towards Dundee. And then the next one is looking north towards Kellis. Then coming back to that plan, we'll now look at junction 4, which is the junction of the C6 and C4. And then this is looking west towards Burnside of Duntroon. And then this is looking east towards the application site. So to turn to some roads matters in particular, mitigation is proposed on the surrounding road network, including widening of the C4 along the site frontage, passing places on the C4 and U315, signage to direct traffic from the B978 Kellis Road, and improvements to visibility splays. Roads did not object on the grounds of traffic impacts, but did recognise the lack of sustainable transport links to the site. Through the various discussions with roads, with the applicant and an engineer representing the objectors, the final position at the point of determination was that the visibility improvements to the C4 and U315 were not required. The visibility improvements to the U315 and B978 still fell slightly short of the required 4.5 metres by 120 metres to the south and 2.4 metres by 120 metres to the north, due to the geometry of the road to the south, which limits the visibility to between 100 and 110 metres, and which could only be achieved with significant engineering works to reprofile the road. The applicant agrees to visibility at this junction, along with a reduction in the speed limit on the B978 from 60 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour, albeit this would be marginally less than required. For information, roads have proceeded with a reduction in the speed limit from 60 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour, in any case as part of a wider B978 route safety initiative unrelated to the crematorium proposal. The speed limit variation order will not be in place by the time the appeal is determined. So turning to the local development plan policies quoted in the reasons for refusal, policy DS1 development boundaries and priorities directs development towards settlements, but permits development out with settlement boundaries where they are of a scale and nature appropriate to their location. Development of greenfield sites will be supported where there are no suitable and available brownfield sites capable of accommodating the development. Policy DS2, accessible development, requires development to demonstrate, according to their scale, type and location, that they meet specific criteria. Matters to be considered include proximity to public transport or improvements to such, and whether there is adequate local road network capacity or where it can be made available. Policy DS3, design quality and placemaking, states that development should deliver a high design standard and draw upon those aspects of landscape or townscape that contribute positively to the character and sense of place of the area. Policy TC8, community facilities and services, states that new community facilities should be accessible and of an appropriate scale and nature for the location. The applicant notes that the planning service accepts the proposal as a type of use unsuitable for a town centre or edge of centre location, but rejects the applicant's sequential assessment and conclusion that there are no suitable and available sites which should be preferred to the application site. The rejection appears to be based on the fact that the planning service has only considered sites in Angus and Dundee, but that this fails to recognise that the proposal is to serve a local need for a crematorium in Angus, having regard to the location and existing facilities in Dundee and Freakham, and that locating another crematorium in Dundee would not address the need for a facility for the people of Angus. It is noted that the test for alternative sites is whether they are suitable for the proposed development, not whether the development can be altered or reduced so that it can be made to fit an alternative site. It was demonstrated by the applicant that there was no suitable available brownfield sites within existing settlement boundaries. Accessibility to public transport is an important consideration in this case, given the very specific use a crematorium is, and that the most likely choice of transport will be the private car. It has been confirmed by local bus companies that in addition to the 2 existing school bus services and the 2 other services which pass the site and within 450 metres of it, that if a bus stop is installed, they would be able to divert and stop at the site. Private electric transport can also be provided, and mourners could also be collected from the existing nearby bus stops if no new bus stop is provided. It is unlikely mourners will walk or cycle to the crematorium. The applicant remains of the view that junction deficiencies are existing, not caused by the development. Very little traffic will be added to them, and that such deficiencies should be addressed by the Roads Authority, regardless of the proposed development, and that their preference is to make a contribution to the Council for any improvements. Refusal based on policy DS3 is disputed, as no fault with the design or impact on the landscape has been highlighted, and that parking and access is acceptable. The Planning Service has no issue with the scale of the design, and the development, having regard to its location and accessibility, has been addressed in terms of policy TC8. It should be noted that the Roads Authority has powers under Section 83 of the Roads Scotland Act 1984 to serve notice on landowners to require improvements, and may carry out the work on the owner's behalf if they agree, but there are obviously costs, including staffing and financial costs associated with that. So turning to National Planning Framework 4, these policies are now applicable to the proposal, as it replaced Scottish Planning Policy and TAPLAN as referred to in the reasons for refusal. Policy 1 concerns tackling the climate and nature crisis, which is an overarching policy. It states that when considering all development proposals, significant weight will be given to the global climate and nature crisis. Policy 13 on sustainable transport seeks to encourage, promote and facilitate developments that prioritise walking, wheeling, cycling and public transport for everyday travel, and reduce the need to travel unsustainably. Clause D states that development proposals for significant travel generating uses will not be supported in locations which would increase reliance on the car, taking into account the specific characteristics of the area. Clause F states that development proposals for significant travel generating uses or smaller scale developments, where it is important to monitor travel patterns resulting from the development, will only be supported where they are accompanied by a travel plan with supporting planning conditions or obligations. Consideration should be given to compliance with Policy 14, Design Quality and Place, which requires proposals to be designed to improve the quality of an area, whether in urban or rural areas, and regardless of scale, where they are consistent with the 6 qualities of successful places. Policy 29 on rural development should also be considered, where rural economic activity, innovation and diversification are encouraged, whilst ensuring the distinctive character of the rural area and the service function of small towns, natural assets and cultural heritage are safeguarded and enhanced. Clause D states that proposals in rural areas should be suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area. They should also consider how the development will contribute towards local living and take into account the transport needs of the development as appropriate for the rural location. In terms of the further submissions, your papers include cases of both the Planning Authority and the applicant and the representations received. Since the submission of the appeal, further representations have been received, and the Planning Authority and applicant have further commented, and a summary of these is as follows. There were a significant number of representations submitted at the time of the application and in response to the appeal, both objecting and in support. Objections included no need, it's not an accessible site, landscape impact, increased traffic on rural roads, no proper sequential test of other sites. And reasons for supporting included that there is a need, other crematoriums are too expensive, it will provide choice, lack of public transport is an unreasonable reason to refuse, and the site fulfills other planning and environmental criteria. In terms of the Planning Authority's response, it concludes that the location is not consistent with the overarching aims of MPF 4 because the development is on greenfield land out with a major city, will be predominantly accessed by car and thus does not minimise greenhouse gas emissions, and that it is contrary to MPF 4 for 3 reasons. 1, with regard to policies 13, 14 and 29, the development would generate significant vehicle movements in a location which is not accessible by a choice of transport modes and would increase reliance on the private car. 2, with regard to policies 5 and 9, the proposal is contrary to the spatial principle of compact urban growth and limiting urban expansion because the development is on greenfield land and disturbs soils. And 3, with regard to policies 1 and 2, the development would generate significant vehicle movements in a location not accessible by a choice of transport modes, would increase reliance on the private car, is not cited to minimise greenhouse gas emissions, and is not consistent with the need to address the global climate and nature crisis. The applicant has responded, stating that the Planning Authority's assessment of the application as a significant travel-generating development is incorrect. This is a point which has generated some discussion, and while there is no planning definition of significant, it is clearly not generating a level of traffic which could be considered significant in comparison, for example, to a large retail development. There is an impact, and a transport assessment was carried out, but given the lack of accident history at the junctions in the area and the type of traffic generated at funerals being respectful and slow moving, the application did not raise significant concerns over its impact on traffic safety. With regard to policy 1, it's noted that this is an overarching policy which requires significant weight to be given to the global climate and nature crisis, but that this does not mean that development in rural areas on greenfield sites cannot take place. With regard to policy 13, it's noted that attending a cremation cannot be considered to be everyday travel as specified in the policy, and that this reduces the applicability of the policy to the development. The applicant also reiterates that the proposed extension of the bus service, providing electric vehicles and dropping points and improvements to the public road network are consistent with policy 13. With regard to policy 29, the applicant points out that what requires to be taken into account is whether the transport needs of the development have been taken into account as appropriate for a rural location, that the policy makes no reference to a breach occurring if a development generates significant traffic, and that proposal will not lead to additional traffic, rather displaced traffic travelling to cremations in Angus. With regard to policy 14, the application was not refused on design grounds, and the applicant has explained the requirement for a rural location and the development is sensitively designed. The applicant states that it is a flawed assessment to say that the development does not comply with policy 5 because none of the valued soils protected by this policy will be affected. There is no breach of policy 9 as this directs us to LDP policy which permits development on non-allocated greenfield land. Policy 2 is also not breached because the proposal will minimise emissions through thermal performance, heat recovery, recycling and electric charging. It is further noted that there are no specific policies governing crematoriums, that the development will generate rural employment and provide a necessary service for the community, that policies are supportive of development that helps to eliminate discrimination and promote equality, particularly tackling social, economic and health inequalities. Actively enabling rural development is seen as key in achieving rural revitalisation, which is a key target of the National Spatial Strategy in MPF 4. The applicant also points out that Policy 25, Community Wealth Building, is relevant and should carry significant weight, and that the different life chances depending on where you live lie at the heart of the proposed development. The applicant provided a sequential assessment to show that there are no other suitable and available brownfield sites which should be preferred to the application site. The application has also been designed to minimise earth movement, making use of the existing contours on the site and locating the development as close to the existing road as possible to minimise the access requirements. Finally, they refer to an article in the Times newspaper in February 2023 about the cost of funerals, and which specifically notes Freecombe as amongst the highest cremation fees. So in some form of conclusion, as DMRC is aware, Scottish planning policy and TAE plan no longer exist, and therefore DMRC needs to decide what weight to be attached to various policies of MPF 4 and the Angus Local Development Plan 2016, reading these documents as a whole, and what weight may be given to other material considerations in making a decision.
Thanks very much, Mrs Tierney, for the background to all of that. Much of that is in the papers that we've been presented with, but it's good to get a summary of it this morning. Members of the committee have an opportunity for any questions to be presented to Mrs Tierney as the planning advisor, or to we have Mr Barnes here from Roads, and also I think Mr Petrie from Environmental Health. Do any members have any questions for Mrs Tierney or the officers at this stage? Councillor Dunn, we'll start with you. You're muted, Brenda.
the average speed cameras, traffic surveys that were done on the site, do you have the ones that have been taken recently?
So is that being addressed to Andy Barnes or to Mrs Tierney?
If Andy's there, I can't see him on my screen.
Thanks, Convener. We don't have any new traffic surveys, no, just the ones that were originally carried out.
Okay, so we're just going with the traffic surveys that were taken. That was in 2022. Would that be right? These were done.
No, 2019.
Right. Okay, so it's considerable time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at all? Councillor Clark, do you have anything? No, not at this stage. Okay.
Not right now, Convener.
Okay. Just the fact you're here and have the access to the slides, can we go back, please, to particularly the junction slides again? And just, I know in your notes, if you can maybe help us with that there, just to go, if we don't mind finding the slides on the road junctions. I think they're quite early on in the pack. Yeah, if you just go back up to the first one. If you do this slide before, Karen, please. Yeah, just so we can see the map again. Yeah, thanks. So we can see that's the 4 key junctions that are referred to. So can we just go through the photographs again, one by one, Mrs. Tierney? Maybe you could just talk to them specifically again here, and just so we get more time to look at them. It's all in the information the pack we've been given, but seeing it properly and you being here will help a lot. So this one, if you don't help, just come in on. This one is at the site itself, isn't it? Looking north the site, and that.
So if you go back to the junction plan, so the site is outlined in.
Oh, sorry, right, okay, yeah.
So junction 1 is between the C4 and the U315. Oh, sorry. My apologies. So the application site is outlined in red. Junction 1, if you pop down to the next slide, Karen, is the junction of the C4 and the U315, and that's looking north to the site. So you kind of go up the road there and you go round the corner, and the site is just
on the right-hand side.
Just on the left there, basically past the tree in the middle of the slide. And then when you look to the south, that's the same junction looking towards the B978, which is the Kellis Road. Mm-hmm. So that's looking away from the application site. This junction, there's no visibility improvements required to this junction.
Okay.
And then we'll go to number 2, which is the junction of the C4 and the B978. So this is looking south towards Dundee. Mm-hmm. You obviously see there's a wall there on the right-hand side of the picture, and then looking to the north towards Kellis. Slightly clearer view there. That's obviously quite a compromised junction in terms of visibility. Mm-hmm. So the directional signage that is proposed as part of the application would effectively seek to stop people coming and going from that junction, and to use the next junction, if we go down to that one, which is junction 3.
Just for the voids of doubt there, so on that junction, there's been, I know that the intent is to direct vehicles to the other junction, but on that one, was there any recommendation for works to be done there at all as part of this?
No.
There wasn't actually. Right, okay. Okay. Sorry, carry on.
And then this is now junction 3, which in all likelihood is going to be the main junction that will access the development from the Dundee Kellis Road. So from this junction, this is now you coming away from the, sorry, it's okay. This is you coming away from the development back out onto the Kellis Road, looking towards Dundee to the south. Mm-hmm. And this is the area where the geometry of the road doesn't quite allow for the full visibility of 120 metres to the south to be achieved. And then looking to the north side on the next slide, the visibility on that side could be achieved with removal of some of the foliage and so on.
But going back to that, the one before, looking south,
Yes.
as it stands at the moment, there's insufficient visibility, we're saying there.
I'm going to ask Andy to pop in on this one now.
Yeah, that's correct, convener. Can't provide the required visibility due to the profile of the road because there's a vertical crest there.
Right.
So that would require extensive engineering works to reprofile the road to achieve the required visibility sight line towards Dundee there.
But looking, stay on that, that's okay. But looking north, that was okay, Andy, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
that's
So
correct.
this is all in the records we've got, and we've read this. But this is why it's helpful talking it through and seeing on the pictures here. So this is the one that was saying that we need required engineering work here, particularly the visibility that's there at the moment. I think is recorded somewhere in the records again, but
it's approximately 100 to 110 metres.
Currently, as it stands just now.
As it stands at the moment.
Okay, and it should be 120. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But once the speed limit is reduced.
Right. I was going to come to that part as well. Okay, so okay, and your experience here. For the engineering work that we feel that the council feels is required here, is that quite extensive to do that?
It is, yes.
Okay. Was there another? There's number junction 4. I think we had as well, didn't we?
Yes, convener. There's one more. Junction 4 is to the west there, just at Duntroon House, looking west towards Burnside of Duntroon, and then the last one looking. That's okay. Looking towards the east, towards the application site.
And again, was there any recommendations on visibility?
No.
Displaying everything in these sites? No. Okay. Right, I've got 2 more questions from myself. One was just what I was saying. You referred to the drop in speed limits. Was it on the B978 from recommended from 60 to 40 at the junction 3? I think we looked at there. Can you just go back to what has been said about that with the conversation with the council?
So I'll maybe bring Andy in as well, sure. But the agreed visibility requirement was for the visibility to be in conjunction with the lowering of the speed limit to 40 miles an hour. And my understanding is that that's a piece of work that the council is pursuing in any case as part of wider improvements, notwithstanding the application. But Andy.
Yes, Communities Committee previously approved a reduction in the speed limit from Balumby Castle Estate to just north of Wellbank, so it's all part of a wider route network.
Okay, and when are they expecting that to be done, Andy Joe?
As and when resources.
Okay. But the speed limitation for that stretch of road then from Balumby north is unlikely to be in place before we are asked as a committee, whether it's today or future meetings.
Correct.
To appeal. Right, okay. All right, that's all helpful. The last question I've got, just looking at the slides as well, is on the roads, all the ones we're talking about, and I'll address it to you, Andy, is that we're talking about the C4, U315, and forget the B978 for the moment, but the inner roads that lead off the B978 to the site that we've looked at in the various junctions we've looked at are, which of all these roads are roads capable of two-way traffic, specifically, and which are effectively single-track roads?
They're all capable of two-way traffic, but part of the mitigation by the applicant was to provide passing places on the C4 between the U315 and the B978. That's the short section.
Mm-hmm. I'm remembering through the papers as well, was there some requirement or being offered for widening the road as well?
In front of the site, that's the U315, and between the site and the B978. The road will be widened in front of the site and passing places, further passing places installed between the site and the B978.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks very much. Thanks again, Mrs. Tierney. I thought that might stimulate some more information. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, you just actually asked my question, convener, regarding two-way traffic. Would it be possible for us to, that if we went back to the slides it was the one with the map of all the junctions.
Just give us a couple of seconds, Tommy, to get that back up on the screen.
Yeah. So, would it be possible to get a map sent to us showing the wider area, because it's obviously just showing us a little area there of the junctions. It's just to get it in my head exactly the location and, you know, all the approaches to this. Also, is it possible for Mr. Barnes to tell us the distances, rough distances between junctions 2, 1 and 4? On the, is that the, that would be is that a U road? No, that's a C road, the C4.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my 2 things.
Okay, 2 things there. We can easily get a more extensive map out to people. That's not a problem. Maybe not today, Mr. Barnes, but maybe for we could maybe get some information specifically on the distances between these. Between junction 2, junction 1, junction 4. It wouldn't do any harm to between 3 and 1 as well, just for information's sake.
Sorry, if you bear with me, convener, a couple of minutes, I could get you the distances now.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Thank you very much for that.
May actually be good, convener, to have a visit to this and drive it ourselves.
Yeah, we'll come to that, Councillor Stewart, later on in the meeting, if that's okay. Right. Is there any other questions at all for Council Officers, Mrs. Tierney, at the moment? And Mr. Barnes will come back shortly on information. Don't rush on that, but Andy, we've got plenty of other things to talk about. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you very much, Mr. Tierney, again. If you're staying for the rest of the meeting, then we may come back to the referral for you. So on the basis of that, there are no more questions at the moment. Just a bit of note here. As convener of this differently constituted Dmrc until such times as the application for review has been concluded, I can confirm that this Development Management Review Committee is required to consider if it has sufficient information to determine the review without further procedure. If members do not determine the review without further procedure, this review committee must determine the manner in which the review is to be conducted. The procedures available to us in terms of the regulations are A, written submissions, B, hearing sessions, or C, inspection of the land to which the review relates, essentially a site visit. I propose to suggest initially I open the meeting to members for their thoughts and comments as their initial read of all the documents they've had been presented with them earlier, and we'd ask at this stage that they give no indication of their views as to whether the appeal should be upheld or not. It's merely their thoughts and comments on what they've read and what's been presented to them. I would particularly like to hear from each member in turn, particularly whether or not they have sufficient written information, and if so, whether they feel they can make a determination on the application appeal today, or whether further procedure is required as the 3 elements I've stated. If the latter, what further procedures they would suggest are appropriate. Once all members have provided comments, we can consider the next steps of the procedure. That is to consider if further procedure is required or not before being able to determine the appeal. So can I, before I give my thoughts and views on things so far, can I ask each of the other 4 members just to give their initial thoughts and comments on what they've read and heard, and if any questions come out of that today. I'm going to start with Councillor Durno, if that's possible.
Thanks, convener. I feel I've got enough information on the plans and the workings of the plans, etc. The question I did ask earlier, I feel like there should be a new traffic survey put in place, camera, before we make the deliberation, because I'd like to see what the speed of the traffic is in that area, because traffic has changed since 2019. This is now 2024. So I'd like to see, maybe more people are travelling by cycle. You don't know, because we haven't got the up-to-date information. I would like to see some kind of traffic survey done in the area to see what the situation is with the traffic and the speeds that they're doing in the area before I make my deliberation. Thank you.
I'm going to come to Councillor Clark in the building. Linda.
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for that very involved report, that summary. I would have to say, Convener, that reading that amount of papers, and I've been through it once, now on the second time, got quite a lot of information in it. Planned reference for me, very helpful, etc. But I actually need a site visit. There's no way that I can determine this without a site visit. Whatever anybody else says, Convener, I'll need a site visit.
Councillor Gall.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, there's a huge volume of papers, so I'm quite comfortable with the written documentation that we have that is sufficient, but I would echo Councillor Clark that I think a site visit puts everything into real perspective and would be really useful just to see it with our own eyes, given the locality is not somewhere that I'm familiar with.
Thanks, Councillor Gall. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, likewise, Convener, and I do agree with Councillor Durno's comments as well. I think we need to have an up-to-date survey of the roads there as well. Thanks
very much. On the basis of that, I will come back to all of that. Just to add to this, and this is me as an individual councillor and a member of this committee, that rather than just convener, but to assist me in being able to contribute to the determination of this application appeal, I think I have to consider a number of key issues. Since this planning application was initiated, we now have the introduction of NPF4. Although the local development plan was adopted in September 2016 and NPF4 adopted on 13th of February 2023, planning legislation, as you know, indicates that where there is any incompatibility between the provision of the National Planning Framework and the provision of the Local Development Plan, whichever of them is later in date is to prevail. It's important to note there are no policies in NPF4 which deal specifically with crematorium development, but there are various policies within it that require to be considered and bear relevance to this planning application. Policies 1 and 2 bear significant cognizance must be given to the global climate crisis, including reducing car use and promoting more sustainable transport. On amenity and location, there's no doubt in my mind that the siting of a crematorium requires to be in an appropriate, calm and sensitive setting, ideally on the edge or within a short distance of a population centre, but not in an urban environment. So does this proposed development fulfil this criteria? In addition to this, is this the only appropriate site, or are other brownfield sites available? Or, bearing in mind that the site we are considering is a greenfield site within a rural area, are other greenfield sites more appropriate? I recognise the concerns around the issue of location and potential impact of amenity, but need surety as to the extent of the impact and mitigation offered. In essence, I have no concerns with its design, and I'm comforted by the plans for biodiversity. On access and transport, while I acknowledge that the claims regarding funeral poverty may be relevant and that a site for a new crematorium to cover South Angus and North Dundee may be appropriate, again, is this the right site? Is the road network sufficient and suitable to accommodate this application? If not, is the suggested mitigation we've just heard sufficient? I have concerns about the road network, particularly the C4 and U315 and access from the P978, junction visibility and width of roads given the potential increase in traffic. Much is made of the need for access to public transport. Is this reasonable, and are the proposals put forward by the applicant to address this realistic, given that there are no footpaths from recognised bus stops, no sustainable means of transport or cycle links? Having read the papers and submissions for this application, for me these are the key aspects that require further consideration, and to help me consider them further, there's no doubt that a site visit is paramount. So, listening to other members, it appears we have sufficient written evidence on which to base a decision, but the majority feel that a site visit is necessary to provide a broader perspective to many of the arguments for and against the application. So if a site visit is agreed today, then at the next meetings, Members will again require to determine if they have sufficient information to consider the application for review, or may determine that further procedure is again required. So, based on everything we've heard today and listening to other members, I would like to move that an unaccompanied site visit take place at a date to be agreed with council officers, and that this committee reassembles on a date and time to be agreed following the site visit, at which time members will consider whether further procedure is required. If no further procedure is required, then the committee, after having reviewed the cases submitted by the Planning Authority, the applicant, all lodged representations and the applicant's responses to these representations, will come to decision regarding the appeal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Clark, thank you very much. Is there an amendment from any of the other members? Happy to take any comments from members in relation to that motion. You all okay with that? In which case that motion is carried. That brings this meeting of the DMRC to a close. Can I thank everyone for their attendance and contributions today, and clearly what's been a considerable read of papers in the run-up to today's meeting. Can I ask we end the recording, but would members stay online, please? We need to discuss certain items after this meeting.